In this problem, you're asked to solve by completing the square. So the first step in completing the square is to divide both sides by the number in front of x squared if that number is not a 1. So since in this problem the number is a 6 instead of a 1, what we'll do is we'll divide both sides by that 6. So we'll have 6x squared divided by 6 minus 1 divided by 6x minus 5 divided by 6 equals 0 divided by 6. So when we simplify that, we get x squared minus 1/6 x minus 5/6 equals 0. Then what we'll do is we will add 5/6 to both sides. So x squared minus 1/6 x equals 5/6. So whatever term does not have a variable, in this case it was 5/6, we move it to the other side. Alright, now what we want to do is the step that we phrased as half square add. So we're going to take the number in front of x, we're going to half it, we're going to square it, and we're going to add it to both sides. So in this case it's negative 1/6. So I'm going to go off to the side here and I'm going to divide that number in half. Negative 1/6 divided by 2 is the same as taking this and multiplying by the reciprocal of 2, so I'm going to look at 2 as 2 over 1. So we have negative 1/6, we keep this, change your division to multiplication, and then flip or multiply by the reciprocal of the denominator. So we have negative 1/6, change to multiplication, flip that fraction, and we get negative 1/12. So that's what we get when we half the term in front of, or the number in front of x. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and square it and add it to both sides. So we have x squared minus 1/6 x plus, we got negative 1/12 when we divide it in half, we square it. Then 5/6 plus negative 1/12 squared. Now what we learned was that although this becomes x squared minus 1/6 x plus 1 over 144, and we're asked to find what multiplies to give us 1 over 144, so what multiplies to give us 1 over 144, but adds or subtracts to give us negative 1/6, what we found was that this number, before we squared it, was the number that would show up in our factored answer. So what I mean is, if we were to take negative 1/12 and multiply it times negative 1/12, we would get 1 over 144, which is what we needed for the last term. And then if we took those same two numbers and we added them, we would get negative 2/12, which would give us what we needed as that center value here, negative 1/6. So again, what we'll always notice is the number before we square it is going to be the number that shows up in our factored answer. So x minus 1/12 squared is equal to, now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to find a common denominator. So we're going to look for a common denominator for 6 and 144. So we need to multiply the numerator and denominator by the number 24. That will give us 5 times 24. And then in the denominator, 6 times 24. So the left-hand side we'll leave alone. The right-hand side is 121 over 144. Take the square root of both sides. Solving using the square root property, we get plus or minus the square root of 121 over the square root of 144. Square root of 121 is 11. The square root of 144 is 12. Now we're going to add 1/12 to both sides, so we get x equals 1/12 plus or minus 11/12. And we'll split this into two answers, 1/12 plus 11/12, and also 1/12 minus 11/12. Alright, so we end up with x is equal to 12 over 12, which gives us x equals 1. And then we get x equals negative 10 over 12, which gives us x equals negative 5 over 6.